Hi guys! I have another paper for you. This one is on gopher tortoises, and my inspiration is that I'll be working with these guys for the next 8 months. They are super cool. They live on land and they make burrows, which is why we call them gopher tortoises. Their scientific name is Gophurus polyphemus, and these burrows are awesome. They can be up to 20 feet long. Over 350 other species of animals use these burrows as habitat. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, because this is relevant to the paper that I'm going to be talking about, the width of the burrow is highly correlated with the length of the turtle shell, the turtle's carapace, the tortoise's carapace. So you may have heard that word before, correlated. When something is highly correlated, let me draw this out for you. So as carapace length, or the top part of the tortoise's shell is the carapace, as carapace length gets larger along the x-axis, burrow width, putting along the y, also gets larger. So along the x we have carapace length, on the y we have burrow width. Something that's highly correlated would have a r-square valued of 1. So that means with 1 unit of x increase, you get a unit of y increase. So that's when you have a relationship that looks like this. I don't know if carapace length and burrow width are that highly correlated, but they are highly correlated. So what that means is that essentially the bigger the tortoise, the bigger the burrow. And it seems like common sense, but it's interesting because you can use burrows as a type of survey for gopher tortoises. And by measuring the burrow size, you can tell whether it was a juvenile that burrowed or an adult. And that'll come into play in the paper as well. So this paper is called Gopher Tortoise Demographic Response to a Novel Disturbance Regime. Demographic, so they wanted to find out population size, they wanted to look at age class distribution, how many juveniles, how many adults. They wanted to look at sex ratios, male to female, and they wanted to look at survivorship. So the reason for this, they were studying these tortoises in a habitat that has 3 different kinds of land cover types. So this is called Red Hill, this square where the research was conducted. Right in the center is Hill Garden, and this area is mowed frequently over the last 80 years. This orange is recently restored, and the way that the land is restored here in the scrub / sandhill habitat is by prescribed burns. So in the last 10 years, this highlighted section has been burned at least 7 times, I think. And then the blue is an area that is called fire suppressed land cover type. So that's where we have not had prescribed burns. Gopher tortoises are federally listed, and the reason for that is because their habitat has been degraded. So they are a species of animal that needs fire. They live in habitat with open sandy spots and grasses and low growing fleshy vegetation that they're able to eat. So they eat grasses and low growing plants. But if you don't have fire, then that land has time to have successional changes. So it has grasses, but then the grasses are outshaded by the shrubs that grow, which are then turning into pines. So that canopy cover just increases with the length of time from burn. Also correlated, right? So if you have a long time without burning an area, that canopy cover is going to get taller and taller and bigger and bigger and bigger. And gopher tortoises need frequent burns so that they have that sandy habitat with grass. All right, so that is why it's been degraded, their habitat, because humans don't like fire, right? We're worried about our houses being burned down, rightfully so. But you have one or the other. You have controlled, low intensity, frequent fires, or you have uncontrollable, catastrophic wildfires that cannot be controlled. So it's kind of a lesser of two evils situation. The public doesn't want to have fires, but land managers know that you need to have fire, or you'll have fire one way or another. So it can either be controlled or uncontrolled. So that's what a lot of land management down here in Florida is. It's all old pastures, essentially, that have that are trying to be restored to the natural habitat that once was sandhill. Okay, so we have these three different types of land cover in the study site. We're studying gopher tortoises. We're trying to figure out demographics. So the way that they did this was mark recapture studies to estimate population size. They conducted burrow surveys where people walk in transects and count how many burrows they find, as well as measuring the burrows to see whether it was juvenile or adult making them. And then every time that a tortoise is captured, you measure them, weigh them, sex them, age them, and that way you can get a full picture of the demographics of that population. And the reason that they wanted to look at all of this was to kind of clarify what the consequences are for these different land cover types across the state and across the range of the gopher tortoises. So gopher tortoises range is the southeastern United States, east of the Mississippi, and a lot of agriculture, a lot of development where tortoises typically won't be found, but a lot of suburbia, mowed areas, roadsides, old pastures. So those kinds of things, those kinds of habitats are where you can find gopher tortoises because their natural restored habitat is very, very inaccessible or infrequent. All right, so what they found. They found that the population they estimated was 113 tortoises in this area. They found that it was slightly female biased, which could be caused by several reasons. One thing to mention that's pretty cool is that most reptiles exhibit something called temperature-dependent sex determination. So while they're in their egg, in the nest, the temperature of the nest determines which sex they'll develop into. Hotter nests typically produce all female, and cooler nests typically produce all male. And so sea turtles, aquatic turtles, some snakes, alligators, a lot of different reptiles have this phenomena. But the point of that, as temperatures rise, if a nest is hotter than normal for whatever reason, maybe it's not as much sand, it's shallower, a nest could be hotter and then turn up more females. Or there could be survivorship. The males, for whatever reason, could have higher mortality. So several different reasons why that could happen, why the sex ratio might be skewed. Juveniles had higher mortality, which is also fairly common. Once tortoises reach a certain size, predators don't really want to mess with them because it's not enough bang for your buck. But if you come across a tortoise that's this big, might be like a tasty little snack for you. So that's also common. Red Hill is dominated by adults, so there were a lot more adults than any other age class. Hill Garden was also female biased, and also had larger adults. So here in the center of the Red Hill, that we called Hill Garden, where it's mowed, had the highest amount of individuals found, highest amount of burrows, and not only the highest amount of burrows, but also the highest density. So per area, just a ton of burrows out there. And the reason for this is because this area has been mowed for 100 years or almost 100 years. And so in the area surrounding it where habitat has just recently been restored, you start seeing movements of gopher tortoises out toward the restored habitat. But for almost 100 years, that mowed area has been the preferred habitat for these tortoises. So it's pretty obvious that they would be in high abundance there. And so what does this all mean? One theory is that this could cause ecological traps. So I mentioned ecological trap in my last talk about my thesis, where there may be this habitat that seems really suitable, where tortoises are finding food, finding mates, finding habitat, but for some reason population is declining or reproductive success is low. Usually, so that would be the next step in this type of research would be to figure out if it was an ecological trap. And the way that you would do that would be to figure out how much area is suitable where tortoises can live and what area they do live in. And then maybe potentially talking about the survivorship between those two habitats. And then lastly, another consequence of having this like really small preferred habitat would be something called the Emlyn O-ring theory, or female defense polygamy. And so what this phenomena is when you have a bunch of females clustered together in a small area, well, I'll back up. Male gopher tortoises fight for the chance to mate with a female. So typically they would encounter a female, one male would encounter a female, try to court her. If another male encountered that, they would battle. Usually the larger one would win. That is in a circumstance where it's just one female, and it's kind of rare. Maybe it's less they are less frequently running into females, finding females. In this scenario, where burrow density is high, adult females are clustered in this little area, female defense polygamy is where now you have one male that outcompetes with other males for the cluster of females. And this can lead to genetic bottleneck. So you have one male that wins, that outcompetes, and mates with all of these females. And genetic diversity, so as opposed to having a ton of males that are coming in and courting and mating with all of these females and increasing genetic diversity, you would have one male that's winning the cluster. And so that can cause huge declines in genetic diversity, which is also further research that has been done and continues to be done. So I guess the main takeaway from the paper for me was land management, and something super interesting to learn about down here, because I grew up, where I didn't really experience wildfires or learn about them a lot, but it's a natural part of land management, and it's cool to learn about how these frequent low-intensity burns are necessary to keep this habitat natural. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Florida is super flat, and there are a ton of cows here, which I didn't know about, and a ton of oranges, and the orange trees are in bloom, and it smells delicious when you're driving through all the citrus fields. And that's it. Oh, I took my bucket hat off for my Port St. Lucie hat. But the bucket hat's coming back tomorrow. Bye, guys.